Hi there, and welcome back to the workbook. Today's video is going to be Chapter 2. So, executive function, the networks of executive function. We are born with the neurological networks for executive function. Neurologic networks are different areas of the brain that fire together for certain functions. Interestingly and importantly, executive function is not a set of skills that can be taught. You may hear otherwise, but that is incorrect. Executive function is the ability to use the mind's brakes, the mind's voice, the mind's eye, the mind's heart, and the mind's playground to stop, look back, to plan ahead. It is the ability to direct our behavior forward in time utilizing the connected networks of our brain. It's sort of like I compare it to buying a house that already has the wiring in the walls. We just need to find the outlets, light sockets, and so forth to utilize them. Some houses have good wiring that functions well, powers all of our devices, doesn't blow fuses, and meets building safety codes. Some houses have outlets where the sockets are so loose the cord falls out and won't stay plugged in, or where that LED bulb in the kitchen flickers all the time, and every time you run the hairdryer and the microwave at the same time, the breaker flips and you have to go down to the panel to flip it back over. We inherit the neurological networks of executive function through the genes of our parents. We get the executive function we get. Just like we get the height we get, or the eye color, or the shape of our nose. This is how genetic it is. And some people inherit brain networks that work like a charm. Others do not. That's not to say executive function can't be bolstered by supports or damaged by injury, but know that if you have ADHD and are struggling with executive function, which is sticking to the universal timeline and acting now in ways that benefit your future, it's not your fault. People with ADHD have weaker mind's brakes, mind's voice, mind's eye, mind's heart, and mind's playground due to inherited structural differences in our brains. We have a difficult time looking back to plan ahead. It's really difficult for us to learn from our own mistakes. And it's just kind of like we're a little too far away from the Wi-Fi router to have a good signal. But as society has evolved, so has the demand for and the sophistication of executive functioning. In prehistoric times, man was not contemplating his 5, 10, or 20-year plan. Surviving the day was the only priority. But as our survival has become more secure, we gained the freedom to think further into the future. When humans started farming, thinking about harvesting and storing the goods and planning for next year's crops became more necessary. Ancient cave drawings discovered in Europe not too long ago are believed to be the first calendar created by humans, and they're just about 20,000 years old. So then comes medieval times, then the industrial era, and then the information era, ... And, now more than ever, we are pressured to think far, far into the future before we're really capable of this. What do you want to be when you grow up? Is a common question asked to preschoolers. And at the same time, we are just bombarded with information and choices that demand our immediate attention and push us towards impulsivity. So, take a look at this chart. This is from one of the most influential psychoanalysts of the 20th century, Erik Erikson. And this is basically an example of a lifespan timeline in the context of how meeting psychosocial challenges sets us up for the next stage of development. And this is basically a bird's eye view of how executive function across the lifespan arises. You can kind of look at this and maybe circle or think about where your ADHD started creating barriers for you to move on to the next stage and the next stage and the next stage. And the great news is that you can at any time keep working on challenges from past stages. So keep reading and keep an open mind to your potential. But I just kind of want to zoom into school age, 6 to 11 years old. This basic conflict was described as industry versus inferiority. And I think this is probably the most common time period of development where ADHD starts to maybe cause some problems. And the next one would be in adolescence. So let's talk about industry versus inferiority. So the concept is that children need to cope with new social and academic demands, and success leads to a sense of competence, while failure results in feelings of inferiority. Go listen, if you haven't already, to the shaming language presentation, which talks about the inner wound of competence, a competence psychic wound. And, this preschool years and school age is when this really starts to develop. So people with ADHD, kids with ADHD, receive at least 6 times more negative feedback by the time they're 12 years old as compared to their same age neurotypical peers. 6 times the amount of negative feedback. So here's where ADHD started tripping you up, and it may not have been quite impairing you yet. If your parents were very structured, then you may have, gotten by pretty well. But then adolescence, then we've got identity versus role confusion. And here, teens need to develop a sense of self and personal identity. Success leads to an ability to stay true to yourself, while failure leads to role confusion and a weak sense of self. Again, go listen to the shaming language presentation. And, if you're a people pleaser, this is, kind of can start to explain that. And then we go into young adulthood, age 19 to 40 years, and we've got intimacy versus isolation. And in this stage of development, young adults need to form intimate, loving relationships with other people. And success leads to strong relationships, while failure results in loneliness and isolation. So, we need social interaction. We need, mastery over our environment. We need success. We need to be able to feel like we know who we are. And ADHD gets in the way of this quite a bit. So, all right, let's move forward here. So let's do the reflection now, and, just a couple questions. How easy or how difficult has it been for you to operate on a linear universal lifespan timeline? At what point along the lifespan timeline were things becoming more challenging for you? For some people, it's when they went to college and all external structure was removed and things started to fall apart. And maybe you pick up the pieces a little bit and then they fall apart again when you get married or have children, things like that, where more and more pressure is put on your executive function. So on the daily timeline, what timeline block is one where you really shine? Think about these questions, and then I'll see you in chapter 3.